It's us again. We're popping back in with some bonus goodies.
We found a wealth of intriguing tales while digging around in the archives during our research for the episodes on the myths and depictions and sightings of aquatic sea monsters. So we thought we would share them with you, just for a little bit of extra fun. I'm Kate.
And I'm Renee. Hop on board and take a deep sea monster seeking dive with us into the silent world.
We did not think we would really find any sea monster sighting related stories in the newspaper archives in Australia, as they tend to date to relatively recent times following colonisation. By this time, almost all the places on Earth had been reached, mapped, and science was gaining a much better understanding of the natural world of the sea and its denizens.
Well, we thought wrong. Not only are there stories in the papers relating to incidents around our neck of the woods, there are also stories that have made it over here and been reported from overseas. People all over the world were still reporting sea monsters.
Some are surprisingly modern. We find accounts from the late 19th and early 20th centuries. Some sound familiar, and the monsters represent the type of cryptids we have come across in the earlier episodes. And some others just sound unlike any creature we know of, either real or imagined.
Now, cryptids is a term used to describe creatures like the Loch Ness Monster and all her international cousins, and other creatures such as Bigfoot, for example. To use a phrase made popular by the film My Big Fat Greek Wedding, which I'm sure a lot of people have seen, it comes from the Greek word krypto, which means hidden, secreted, and is also the Greek word for the children's game hide and seek, which actually seems fitting here.
There were so many great articles out there, it was difficult to choose between them. But we finally settled on 6 of these. They are all from different decades, starting in the 1870s and running all the way up to the 1930s. The 1930s were especially rich in sightings of monsters, and not just in Australia.
Let's get straight into one of the earlier modern articles we found, dating to March 1877 in the Alexandra Times paper of the state of Victoria. The article had originally appeared in the London and Graph.
Various accounts from time to time have been given of the extraordinary monster seen from on board the screw steamer Nestor, and the fact that such a creature was described is now put beyond question by a formal oath taken by the captain and surgeon before the acting law secretary of Her Britannic Majesty's Supreme Court Shanghai. The creature does not, however, appear to have been of the serpent tribe. The captain's deposition is as follows.
I, said John Webster, in command of the screw steamer Nestor, do declare that on Monday, the 11th of September, at 10:30 a.m., 15 miles northwest of North Sandland Lighthouse, the weather being fine and the sea smooth, the air was perfectly clear. I saw a little forward of the beam on the starboard side, about 200 yards distance from the ship, an object pointed out to me by my third officer, who remarked, "There is a shoal." Surprised at finding a shoal in such a well-known track, I watched the object and found that it was in movement, keeping up at the same speed with the ship, and retaining about the same distance as when we first seen. The speed of the ship was 9 3/4 knots, and the object was moving parallel with us, during 6 minutes. Just after I observed it, and the Chinese deck passengers discovered it and raised a great outcry, and at about the same moment it was described by 3 saloon passengers and the surgeon. The whole watch also saw it. The shape of the creature, for that it was alive there was no doubt. I would compare it to that of a gigantic frog. Referring to the head and the body, as far as that was apparent above the water, the head, of pale yellowish colour, was about 12 feet in length, and in 6 feet of crown was above the water. Occasionally, the head subsided only for a foot, or a foot and a half that remained above the water. I tried in vain to make out with my eyes and my mouth. The mouth, however, may have been below the water. The head was immediately connected to the body without any indication of a neck. The body was about 45 feet, or 50 feet in length, and an oval shape, perfectly smooth. But there was also a slight ridge along the spine. The black rose some 8 feet above the surface. An immense tail, fully 150 feet in length, a few inches above the water. This tail I saw distinctively from its junction with the body to its extremity. It seemed cylindrical, with a very slight taper, and I estimated its diameter at, 4 feet. The body and the tail were marked with alternative bands, or stripes, black and pale yellow in colour. The stripes were distinctive to the very extremity of the tail. I cannot say whether the tail terminated in a fin or not. I examined it carefully at the above-mentioned distance, but could not satisfy myself how the tail terminated. The creature possessed no fins or paddles, as far as we could perceive, never having seen any part of his belly. I cannot say if it had legs. It is very possible that the creature was much broader and more massive than the dimensions above given. It appeared to me to progress by means of an undulatory motion of the tail in a vertical plane. The tail seemed to have an independent motion, that is to say, a quicker and different one from the actual body. The head would rise slowly and the body became simultaneously lower, and vice versa. The undulations of the tail were brisk and very distinct, and I closely watched them through the good glasses. I had some moments of ideas of running the creature down, but I shortly dismissed the intention on account of the danger of breaking the screw blades. I cannot say if it was even conscious of our presence. It finally dropped under our stern and passed over to the port side, somewhat slacking in its speed. Soon after, however, it increased in its pace, and when was last seen was on our port beam, about 1.5 to 2 miles distance. The creature formed a distinct wake and seemed to exude an oily matter as it moved.
Mr. James Anderson, the surgeon, confirms this statement upon oath and expresses his opinion that the only creature the monster could be compared with are the newt or frog tribe. So, what do you think that could have been?
Honestly, that description brings to mind like a humongous tadpole or something.
I just keep picturing some kind of sea monster from the Studio Ghibli films.
I can see why you would imagine that. The description of the light color makes me think of a beluga whale. They're quite light in color, kind of whitish. But the swimming motion described is more like a shark, that undulatory motion. So it makes me think maybe a whale shark, perhaps. But then, the colors don't quite match because they talk about stripes on the tail and like a pale yellowish. Like it doesn't quite fit. I don't know.
Oh, so it's not whale shark territory that we know of. But can I just say, the bit that I'm taking away from this is that it crossed the master's mind to run over the creature with the ship. I mean, apart from the fact that they would have killed a majestic and rare animal, what would they have done with it after running over it? Like, would they have pulled over to check on it? Would they have gotten in the water to collect the corpse? What would they have done with the rotting animal? Would it have been left on the deck for the rest of the journey to entertain the passengers? I just don't quite get that thinking of we'll just run it over with the ship and it'll be fine.
Oh, yeah, that mentality. I don't get it. Well, I think just channeling Gus from our Big Fat Creek wedding here, if he really wanted it gone, he should have just put some Windex on it. That's how you get rid of stuff. Maybe that's what the apparently oily matter the creature was exuding was. Its own version of Windex trying to get rid of the ship from its patch of water. Like, get out of here. Get out.
I like your sound effects.
Another article, which is one of the more recent ones of the lineup here today, describes something that sounds a little more familiar as far as cryptids go. The article appeared in the Newcastle Morning Herald and Miners Advocate in October 1834. Kate, would you do the honours?
I would, but you said 1834.
Wow. The article appeared in the Newcastle Morning Herald and Miners Advocate in October 1934. Kate, would you do the honours?
I will try my best. A graphic story of having seen at close quarters the sea monster, which is reported to have been sighted several times recently, was told in Townsville last week by Mr. H. Mill, one of the principals of the Yeppoon deep-sea fisheries at Rockhampton, who has been operating in Townsville waters. During the first week in August, when off North Reef, about 75 miles from Yeppoon, he was amazed to see within 10 cards of his boat 2 large lengths of body above the water. He did not see the head, middle or tail, but 2 great curves were showing, each about 20 feet in length. They were practically as round as a 40-gallon fuel drum, with scales as big as a man's hand. Mr. Mills called out to the other members of the crew, but before they reached the deck, the creature had gone.
I don't know. What do you think? Real or imagined? A mirage of the sea, perhaps? Or a result of a tired mind?
Maybe a bit too much salt while he's been fishing?
Potentially. But isn't that always the way, right? I reckon this sea monster was like, I'm just going to appear to this one dude, and then when the others come, I'm going to disappear so he looks crazy.
Do you think the sea monster's like out there enjoying its afternoon on the waves, and then it's like, humans,
You know what? I think that could be a thing.
I find it interesting that he describes the 2 loops above the water, and it's 1934, so there had actually been quite a few Nessie sightings in the years
Yes.
before this, and that's what springs to my mind. Even the size and descriptions. Apart from the scales, I don't think Nessie's always said to have scales.
No. So maybe it's a bit of Nessie fever that people are going through, and they're just wanting to cite their own version of Nessie, maybe.
Possibly. It's a great
is
shame
during
that no one else on the crew managed to see it.
Yeah. Very suspicious.
An impaired mind, either by lack of rest or in some cases alcohol, was often suspected when sightings were reported. In an article in the Melbourne Punch of August 1885, makes an unmistakable reference to this.
It has been seen again, this time on the coast of New South Wales. It had a great horn on a hump on its back, a very usual place for horns, suffered much from corns on its fins. Nothing a bit of Windex won't fix, eh? Eh? And was continually combing great masses of slate-coloured hair with a powerful beach comber. The water police magistrate declined to commit the two unfortunate fellows who saw it for a definite period, but remanded them both for medical inspection. A change in the liquor laws is as much needed in New South Wales as Victoria.
Just a subtle suggestion of drunkenness there.
Just a bit. Super subtle, though.
Yeah. It's such a backhanded way of saying we're reporting this, but they were drunk. So drunk.
Yeah.
And yet the suggestion that persons with impaired senses due to alcohol were making up stories about sea monsters was so much of a thing that some reports made a real point of excluding the drunken state from those recounting the story. And such a story appears in the Week in Queensland on June 20th, 1913. Take it away, Renee.
Strange sea monster. A Hobart telegram to the Melbourne Argus dated 25th May was as follows. The Secretary for Mines, Mr. Wallace, has received from Mr. Hardwell Conder, State Mining Engineer, a description of a remarkable animal that is reported to have been seen on the west coast by some of the men engaged in state prospecting work that is being carried on in the little-known country between Macquarie Harbour and Port Davey.
I have to report, he says, the discovery of an animal on the sea coast, about 12 miles north of Port Hibbs, of so strange a character that it is deserving of a special mention. It's so strange that both the men who saw it and I myself anticipate quite chiefly the smiles and incredulity of those who read this account. No one is asked to believe it. The animal was seen by Oscar Davis, foreman prospector, and his mate W. Harris, who are working under myself, the state reigning engineer for Tasmania. I've known both of them for a considerable number of years, and I can guarantee, absolutely, their sobriety, intelligence, and accuracy. They were walking along the coast on 20th of April, just before sundown on a calm day, with small waves rolling in and breaking on the shore, when, at a distance of about half a mile, they noticed a dark object under the dunes, which surprised them by showing signs of movement. They advanced towards it, and finally came within gunshot. When about 40 yards off, it rose suddenly and rushed down into the sea. After getting out about 30 yards, it stopped and turned, showing only the head and portion of its neck, It waited there for about 5 seconds and then withdrew under the water and disappeared. The characteristics are summarised as follows. It was 15 feet long. It had a small head, only about the size of the head of a kangaroo dog. It had a thick, arched neck, passing gradually into the barrel of the body. It had no definite tail and no fins. It was third, the coat appearing in appearance resembling that of a horse or of chestnut colour, well groomed and shining. It had 4 distinct legs. It travelled by bounding, that is, it arched its back and gathering up its body so that the footprints in the 4 feet were level, and also those of its hind feet. It made definitive footprints. When first disturbed, it reared up and turned on its hind legs. Both men are quite familiar with seals and so-called sea leopards that had occurred on this coast. They had seen before and subsequently pictures of sea lions and other marine animals and find no resemblance to the animals that they saw. Such are the details. When humorists have enjoyed themselves at our expense, the men of science may be able to connect this account with others which have come forward from time to time of strange beasts within our oceans. That no imprint was taken of the footprints, and no markings were made in the form of sand. No one regrets more than we do. The next tide swept over them, and they are gone.
It is difficult to follow up such stories, so we haven't found out if any such men of science ever came forward with an explanation. But Renee, what do you think this creature might be?
I don't know. A lot of these reports appear to be a genuine effort on the part of those who have seen these creatures to actually try and describe the features as best they can. It's clear that they are creatures for which they have no names. So this doesn't mean that these species were unknown to all people, but just to those who have never seen one and have no name for it. So it's like us trying to describe animals to aliens with no photo to show. We are so used to just whipping out a phone and snapping a quick picture that it's really difficult for us to think on a time when the equipment to do this was simply not around. But I have to say that I am old enough to remember a time where there were no mobile phones. So anyway, that's how old I am.
In the dark ages, the before times.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The before times. Yeah.
Back
with
when
those...
a phone was just the rotary phone.
Yeah. And you just, I love that because my grandma had one of those and I would just go and I wouldn't even pick up the thing. I just wanted to make the turning bit do the loops because I really loved the sound of it. There is a curious and almost comical description we came across in the Queensland Times from Ipswich in Queensland from November 1923. Kate?
It was about 10 yards long and had a head uncommonly like an elephant's, and yet the rear portion of it was the tail of a fish. This is how the chief officer of the Dutch... I can't do a Dutch accent. This is how the chief officer of the Dutch steamer Slouter, now at Sydney, describes a fearsome object which lunged out of the water about 50 yards from the steamer when she was halfway across the Indian Ocean on the run from Africa. The monster rolled to the surface like a whale, and there was a rush of cameras, but it quickly dived and did not reappear. The officer says it spouted, but to do so it appeared to lift its trunk, and water seemed to come from the mouth. Another officer says he is quite certain he saw an ear on the side of its head. The curator of the Sydney Museum expressed an opinion that it was an elephant seal, animals which frequent Macquarie Island. And the male of the species possesses a short trunk, which is said to dilate when in rage.
Well, from the description of it, yeah, I think the trunk makes it sound like an elephant seal, as the curator suggested.
The thing that I love about this description doesn't focus on the animal, but going back to our previous conversation, that even though there was a rush for cameras, they were still too slow to catch a photo of it. And I would like to picture them all rushing to the sides of the boat with iPhones in their hands, but with 1920s jazz music playing in the background. But I think it's even funnier when it's like, oh, they tried to get a photo with the big 1923 box cameras on their wooden tripods, and like just kind of saying to the creature, like, just hold still. Just wait. You just got to expose the plate and reload the flash.
Gonna get this camera blanket over me. Hold on a sec. Oh, it's brilliant.
So they did have the pocket Kodak cameras were emerging around this time. So they would have had portable ones. I mean, I know we're probably exaggerating the tripods and stuff a bit. Photographic Kodak came out in the 1920s, as did the Cine Kodak, which was actually created in 1923. It was the first 16mm film camera released.
So are these like kind of as big as your hand or a bit bigger?
Like two hands.
Would you hang them around your neck?
2 hands.
2 hands?
Yeah.
Okay. So, not too bad.
Not too bad.
Not as much of a tangle as we thought.
Oh no, they did have Kodak Brownie cameras then as well. Yeah, there was a few options, but yes, it's not quite the same as the selfie sticks. Our final handpicked article of interest we find in the Goulburn Evening Penny Post of August 1894. It seems to describe humans witnessing some sort of battle or chase between sea monsters, which sounds rather thrilling. Just wait until Renee reads it to you.
All right, here we go. Thrilling. An apparently well-authenticated rumour was in circulation on Saturday evening that the sea serpent had been seen at 4 o'clock on that afternoon chasing a whale in the vicinity of Nobby's and Redhead. Many persons declare they saw a large marine monster of the whale species pursued by a large sea animal of the serpentine character, the latter occasionally elevating its neck and body some 6 or 7 feet above the ocean surface while attacking the retreating whale. Both the creatures were watched as far as Nobby's, in which locality they disappeared. In the opinion of some persons, the combatants were only an ordinary-sized whale and a fox shark or thresher. But this theory was discountenanced by the assertion that a sea monster of a similar description had been frequently seen on this coast by reliable citizens of Newcastle, also by passengers on board sailing vessels and intercolonial steamers voyaging along this coast.
Okay, so the interesting thing is a quick Google tells me that because this was in August, it is not outside of whale watching season for the New South Wales coast.
Aha, okay.
Although they do describe it a serpentine character pursuing a whale. But it just...
hard to tell. Because sharks do follow whales around, especially during their mating season, because they can actually feast on the babies.
No, not the babies.
I know. Oh. I know. That's why they follow. They also follow seals around, because obviously, snacks.
I do love the vivid description of this. I feel like the writer really wanted to make sure there was quite a punch up in the water.
Yep, it's very sensational.
Yes. I kind of wish I could hop in a TARDIS and go and watch the sea fight.
And I love it how it says a similar description had been frequently seen on this coast by reliable citizens.
Oh, so not the drunk ones.
Not the drunk ones.
Not this time. They're for tomorrow's paper.
You can't pick on the drunks all the time.
All these stories are fairly recent within the large picture we looked at over the last 2 episodes, where we explored some ancient myths and legends of sea creatures from the Australian waters and the Pacific region, and the representation of sea monsters on 16th and 17th century maps. So why are people, even in the late 19th and early 20th centuries, still captivated by the notion of sea monsters?
It seems strange to us today, where information, including images, is easy to access online, that people could go their entire lives not seeing certain species of sea animals. Even those who travel by sea often, such as the crew of the sailing ships and steamers. Think about the ocean and how vast a realm it is. In fact, its depth and breadth is so great that even to this day, during the age of capable technology, we have yet to completely explore all of the seafloor and are still coming across species in the depths, the like of which we have never encountered before. In this sense, it is easy to see why the possibility of sea monsters persists in the human mind. Wherever the unknown reigns, the human imagination, being the wild thing that it is, will fill in the gaps.
This concludes our stories on sea monsters, for now, and what an adventure it has been. Although we could not pack in any more of the brilliant stories and accounts that we found in our research, we hope that this small snippet has given you a taste of what waits out there to be discovered. Thank you for joining us on this wild and unexpected journey. And I think one thing we really learnt from all of this is that it is always handy to have a camera at the ready to capture that one important photo of the strange and wonderful out there. Especially if you want to prove that you're not drunk. Otherwise, any wild stories of spotting sea monsters may be dismissed as alcohol-fueled tales best kept for sharing around the campfire at Halloween.
And we do like a good barbecue. So join us next time on another adventure into the Silent World for a look, or rather a listen, on the seriously chilling topic of phantoms at sea.
If you would like more information or to view some of the sources from which we have drawn this episode, check out the episode notes on our website, silentworldfoundation, one word, .org.au. And if you'd like to keep up with us, give us a follow on Facebook, Instagram and Twitter. We've been your sea monster watching crew, Kate
and Renee.
Stay safe and don't run over any marine monsters.
Or mammals.
Or cryptids.
Or cryptids.
Until next time. Into the Silent World is a Silent World Foundation production, hosted by Renee Maliaros and Kate Pentecost, with additional voices by Jay Pentecost. This episode would not have been possible without the fantastic resource that is Trove. Trove is a place to explore all things Australian and is a single point of entry to the treasure trove of artefacts, curiosities and stories from Australia's cultural, community and research institutions. It is part of the National Library of Australia and you can find it at trove.nla.gov.au.
Our merry theme tunes were performed and recorded by the Mutineers, Sydney's leading pirate band.
It is so strange that both the men who saw it and I myself anticipate quite cheerfully the smiles and incredulity. What was that word?
I think you lost the character.
Yes.
A graphic story of having seen close quarters.
Close. That was close.
Oof.